I shattered a kingdom, a golden crown forged in blood and betrayal. The stench of rot and sticky blood was my perfume. I lay awake at night, haunted by the echoes of my choices, a secret buried beneath layers of history. It was I who brought this kingdom to its knees. In the beginning, I was the perfect prince, handsome, athletic, adored. The court swarmed around me like moths to a flame. But beneath this golden facade lay a frenzy, an obsession, the desperate need for a son. I watched Catherine, my queen, loyal yet barren, a daughter, Mary, a blessing. But in my heart she was not enough. I needed a male heir. A shadow lurked within me, whispering of betrayal. By God. When the Pope denied my plea for divorce, I felt the ground beneath me tremble. Betrayed not just by my queen, but by the very foundation of my faith. I realized then, the only way forward was to break free. I would not be shackled by the church. I created the Church of England, not for faith, but in a desperate grasp for legacy. This act of defiance shattered the sanctity of my kingdom. But oh, how I craved power. Anne arrived, bold and ambitious. My heart raced. She was my salvation. Together we danced on the precipice of history. Yet she too could not give me a son. I felt betrayed again, as if fate itself mocked me. Whispers of adultery escalated. Her beauty turned to ash. In silence, I watched as her head rolled. My heart remained cold, but inside, I shattered too. I wanted immortality, yet my choices were leaving me haunted. Then came Jane, soft and gentle, like a flicker of hope. I fell, finally believing that I might have my son. When Edward was born, I tasted joy, a fleeting moment in my stormy life. But as Jane slipped away in childbirth, I was left hollow, mourning her loss more deeply than before. I craved a son, yes, but at what cost? The echoes of loss were growing louder. Anne of Cleves, a stranger I rejected at first sight, escaped with her life. Catherine Howard, young and tempting, but unfaithful, I watched her fall. My heart long dead to love. And there was Catherine Parr, more a nurse than a queen. I finally saw my reflection in her eyes. The man I had become, bloated and tyrannical. I had become a tyrant, tearing down monasteries, burning heretics, executing those who dared to defy me, all for a son who ruled only briefly. I wanted to be remembered, but my legacy was soaked in blood and thunder, a kingdom forever changed, and a name etched in infamy. As I lay on my deathbed, I realized the true cost of my pursuit. I had sacrificed everything for a legacy that turned to ash, a kingdom shattered by my own hands. Would my son remember me? Or would he curse the name of a king who shattered his kingdom? But it wasn't the crown or the throne that haunted me. It was the empty spaces around me filled with ghosts of the past. In the shadow of death, as I reflect on my journey, I found a flicker of hope. My legacy may be bloodied, but it is also a lesson, a cautionary tale. If this story haunts you as much as it haunts me, subscribe, for there is still much to uncover from the annals of history. In my youth, I was the epitome of vitality, a god among men, celebrated for my wit and athletic prowess. My charm seemed to dull the edges of the world, and I basked in the glory of my father's kingdom. I was Henry, son of Henry, a lineage that coursed through my veins like the blood of a lion. I wanted for nothing, my path paved before me by the echoes of my ancestors. Yet, as the years slipped by, I felt the tightening grip of expectation, a relentless force pulling me into the depths of despair. Catherine stood by me, loyal in her devotion, yet every glance at her reminded me of my unfulfilled desires. She bore me a daughter, a beautiful girl whose laughter rang like bells in the palace. But I yearned for a son, a male heir to carry forth my name, my legacy. With every passing day, the pressure mounted, a cacophony of voices in my mind urging me to take control of my fate. God himself seemed to conspire against me, and I began to see my failures as divine retribution. I became a man possessed, my heart hardened by the relentless march of time. I sought a divorce, a simple request to the Pope. My plea was met with silence, and in that moment, I felt the world collapse around me. How could God deny me? How could the Church thwart my desires? My desperation turned to rebellion, cutting the ties that bound me to Rome. I would forge my own path, not in faith, but in willful defiance. I became the architect of my own salvation. Anne was different. She was fire and ambition wrapped in silk. Our union sparked a flame that ignited the court. I could almost taste the future, a son born of my blood, a king to ensure my legacy. And yet, as we reveled in our shared dreams, the same cruel fate loomed. Anne became a victim of my insatiable hunger. The whispers of betrayal clawed at the edges of our life, and my heart turned cold once more. The Tower of London loomed large, a place of endings and finality. As Anne knelt before her executioner, I felt the weight of my choices bearing down on me. I had sacrificed her for the elusive promise of a son, and yet nothing filled the void she left behind. My heart ached at the memory of her laughter, a bitter reminder of the love I had lost in my quest for eternal glory. But then came Jane, a beacon in my darkened world. She brought with her hope, the promise of a son that I had longed for. I embraced her, welcomed her into the fold of my desires, believing that she would finally bring me the legacy I sought. And when Edward was born, a whirlwind of emotions engulfed me. Joy, triumph, and yet underneath, a lurking dread. The joy of fatherhood was short-lived, for Jane's life slipped away in childbirth, leaving me in a smothering darkness. As I mourned, I found myself trapped in a web of despair I had woven from my relentless pursuit. My heart hardened, the walls of my castle echoed with silence, and the kingdom I had once basked in reverberated with the ghosts of loss. I turned to Anne of Cleves, a union forged in folly. My heart ached with the memories of betrayal. Her presence only reminded me of what I had lost. Our marriage was a farce, a mere shadow of stability I sought to impose on my crumbling life. I annulled it without a second thought, casting her out of my life. Was it justice, or merely another demonstration of my own empire crumbling beneath the weight of my own making? Catherine Howard entered my life like a summer storm, wild and untamed. I was bewitched by her beauty, her youth casting a bright light over my aging heart. Yet, just like the fleeting summers of my youth, she too was a mirage. Her infidelity was a dagger to my heart, and my resolve hardened once more. The executioner was called, and with her demise, I felt the last remnants of my humanity slip away. In my final days, I was left with the shadow of Catherine Parr, a companion who nursed my frailty. I was a king without a crown, a tyrant feared by all. The echoes of my past enveloped me, reminding me of the empire I had dismantled piece by piece. I had become a man defined by my failures, my desires for legacy overshadowed by the blood on my hands. As I lie gasping for breath, I realized the truth. I had traded my humanity for a fleeting glimpse of power. The kingdom I carved out was one of fear, and the legacy I left behind was one of shattered dreams. In the twilight of my life, I faced the reflection of the monster I had become, a king whose ambition had led to ruin. I yearned for immortality, Yet all I had was a name inscribed in Histria, name that would be whispered in fear and loathing. Would my son remember me for the tyrant I had become, or would he learn from my mistakes, rising to reclaim the legacy I had tarnished? But it wasn't the crown or the throne that haunted me. It was the empty spaces around me filled with ghosts of the past. The choices I made in pursuit of power had not strengthened my kingdom but had fractured it irrevocably. And in the shadow of death, as I reflect on my journey, I found a flicker of hope. My legacy may be bloodied, but it is also a lesson, a cautionary tale for those who would seek to wield power without conscience. If this story haunts you as much as it haunts me, subscribe, for there is still much to uncover from the annals of history. The dawn of my reign was marked by the echoes of fanfare, the clanging of swords, and the cheers of the people. I was hailed as the embodiment of strength and vision, a lion ready to roar for my kingdom. But beneath the surface, the undercurrents of doubt surged like a tidal wave, threatening to engulf me. The anticipation of a male heir gnawed at my insides, a constant reminder of my inadequacy. Catherine, my devoted queen, stood resolute by my side. Her unwavering loyalty was a balm to my troubled heart. Yet the absence of a son cast a heavy shadow over our union. I watched her, a woman of virtue, bearing the weight of my expectations. Each time she presented our daughter to me, I felt a pang of disappointment slither through my veins. It was as if the very heavens conspired against me. As I knelt in prayer, beseeching the Almighty for a change in fortune, I couldn't shake the feeling that God had turned his back on me. I sought answers from the Pope, a man I believed could mend the rift between faith and my ambition. When my plea for an annulment was met with silence, I felt the ground shake beneath me. How could an earthly man deny me? How could he stand in the way of my destiny? Driven by desperation and fueled by anger, I tore down the walls that separated me from Rome. I became a man transformed, shaking the very foundations of the church. I declared myself the head of the Church of England, casting aside the shackles of papal authority. It was not a divine calling, but a desperate act of rebellion against fate. In that moment, I believed I was crafting my legacy, rewriting the rules to fit my narrative. As Anne stepped into my life, I felt the resurgence of hope. Her spirit mirrored my own ambitions. She was a tempest, a whirlwind of desires that matched my own. We danced on the precipice of change, and together we ignited a fervor that enveloped the court. Yet, as I reveled in our union, I felt an unsettling dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. Would she be the answer to my prayers, or would she too slip away like the others? As the whispers of betrayal swirled around us, my heart hardened once more. Anne's perceived sins became my justification for the ultimate betrayal, her execution. The heavy thud of her head hitting the ground reverberated in my soul, echoing the death of my once great aspirations. I had become the very monster I sought to vanquish. Yet, Jane emerged from the ashes of my sorrow, a gentler spirit who offered the promise of renewal. When Edward arrived, my heart soared. For a brief moment, I tasted the sweetness of victory. The legacy I had longed for was finally within my grasp. However, as the light of joy flickered, it was extinguished by the darkness of loss. Jane's untimely death left me reeling, a hollow shell navigating the desolate halls of my castle. In my desperation, I turned to Anne of Cleves, a foreigner brought into my life through political machinations. The marriage was a charade, an empty facade destined to crumble. My rejection of her was swift and merciless, a final act of control in a world spiraling beyond my reach. As I watched her leave, I felt no remorse, only the bitter taste of regret mingling with the blood on my hands. Catherine Howard, a vibrant flower in my wilted garden, promised a fleeting romance. Yet, as seasons changed, so too did my fortunes. Her betrayal cut deep, and I found myself standing once more before the executioner, a man hardened by grief and vengeance. The shadows around me grew darker, and I was left standing alone in the ruins of my kingdom. With each marriage that ended, I felt my humanity slip further away. Catherine Parr, more a caretaker than a queen, became my last chance at redemption, yet even she could not heal the wounds I bore. I was a king trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by echoes of the past. The weight of my actions hung heavy in the air, a suffocating reminder of my failures. As I lay on my deathbed, unable to escape the chains of remorse, I pondered the legacy I had forged. I had become a king of fear, a tyrant whose thirst for power had stripped him of love and humanity. My son, the very embodiment of my hopes, was thrust into a world I had shattered. Would he remember me fondly, or would he curse my name? The thought tormented me. In those final moments, I saw the faces of those I had loved and lost, each one a reminder of the heavy price of ambition. Would they forgive me? Could they find peace in the storm I had created? I was left with the bitter knowledge that my choices had irrevocably altered the course of history. A legacy built on blood and tyranny. The memories cascaded over me, a relentless tide of ghosts and regrets. I sought solace in the fleeting moments of joy I once experienced, yet they felt distant, obscured by the weight of my decisions. The kingdom I had sought to protect lay in ruins, and the name of Henry VIII would forever be synonymous with tragedy and tyranny. As I took my last breath, the realization struck like thunder. I had forged my own chains. My legacy would not be one of honor and glory, but a warning for future generations. In the shadows of my life, I had not only seen the reflection of a king, but also the haunting visage of a man consumed by his own desires. And so I slipped into the embrace of the unknown, leaving behind a world forever altered. May history remember my tale as a cautionary lesson, a reminder that the pursuit of power can come at a devastating cost. If this story resonates with you, if you feel the weight of my choices pressing upon your heart, subscribe to uncover more of the tales woven into the fabric of history. For there are still many stories to tell and shadows to chase. In the annals of time, my name stands out like a dagger's edge, Henry VIII, the king who shattered his kingdom in pursuit of legacy. The chapters of my life tell a tale of ambition, betrayal, and bloodshed, woven into the very fabric of the monarchy. As I reflect on the rise and fall of my reign, I am haunted by the choices I made and the lives I irrevocably altered. It began with dreams, the fervent hopes of a king destined for greatness. I was young, vibrant, and crowned with the promise of a bright future. The court buzzed with life, laughter echoing through the grand halls of the palace. As I strode among my subjects, the cheers of the people filled me with pride. Yet there was an unyielding void deep within my soul. I craved the security that only a son could provide, a male heir to carry forth the mantle of my lineage. Catherine, my devoted queen, bore me a daughter whom I cherished. Yet, as the years slipped away, my heart grew heavy with disappointment. Each glance at Mary reminded me of my failures, and I could feel the echoes of doubt reverberating through the very walls of my kingdom. The whispers of inadequacy spread like wildfire among my advisors, igniting my fear of losing the favor of the court. In my quest for an heir, I felt the constricting grip of fate tightening around me. It was this desperation that drove me to seek a divorce, a request met with the cold indifference of the Pope. How could he deny my right to happiness? How could he stand between a king and his legacy? Furious and defiant, I sought a path that would grant me the freedom to forge my destiny. It was a pivotal moment that would lead to the birth of the Church of England, a seismic shift that reverberated through the ages. Anne Boleyn, a woman of fierce ambition, stepped into my life like a tempest. She was unlike any other, a spark that ignited a fire within my soul. Together we danced the dance of power, and for a moment, I believed that she would deliver the son for whom I so desperately longed. Yet, as the days turned to months, the specter of betrayal loomed large once more. The whispers of infidelity began to poison our union. The court, once a stage for our love, became a battleground of suspicion. As Anne's fate hung in the balance, I felt the weight of the world pressing down upon me. The executioner's axe became a grim symbol of my power, the ultimate measure of my resolve. I ordered her execution, believing it was the only path left to reclaim my legacy. In that moment, as I watched her head roll, I felt a piece of my own soul shatter. Yet, the cycle of despair did not end there. Jane Seymour entered my life like a breath of fresh air, offering the hope of redemption I so desperately craved. With her, I found a flicker of joy, the promise of a son that finally came to fruition. Edward's birth brought me unparalleled ecstasy, but as quickly as that joy arrived, it was snuffed out by Jane's untimely death. In the wake of my losses, I turned to Anne of Cleves, a marriage forged in the fires of political necessity. It was a mistake I quickly rectified, annulling the union with little thought. I had become a king ruled by impulse and desperation, my desires leading me astray. As I gazed into the mirror, the reflection that stared back was that of a tyrant, a man consumed by fear and regret. Then came Catherine Howard, a youthful spirit who reignited the fire within me. For a fleeting moment, I reveled in the warmth of her affection. Yet the shadows of betrayal lurked just beneath the surface. When her unfaithfulness was revealed, I stood once more at the precipice of despair. The executioner's blade loomed ever closer, a reminder that my reign had become a series of tragic miscalculations. As I neared the end of my life, I was left with the haunting realization that my quest for a legacy had led to my own undoing. The ghosts of my past swirled around me, each one a reminder of the choices I made in the name of ambition. In the twilight of my reign, I was a king without a kingdom, a ruler whose name would be forever etched in infamy. The weight of my decisions bore down heavily upon me, and I understood the cost of my ambition. I had sacrificed everything for a fleeting moment of glory, yet the echoes of my choices remained etched in the hearts of my people. The land I had sought to protect lay in ruins, and the throne I once cherished was tainted with the blood of my enemies. As I lay there, drawing my final breaths, I wrestled with the idea of how history would remember me. Would I be seen as a tyrant or a visionary? Would my quest for power overshadow my moments of brilliance? The uncertainty gnawed at me, a constant reminder that my legacy was not mine alone to shape. In those final moments, as the light began to fade, I found solace in the knowledge that history is not simply written by the victors. It is shaped by the lessons of the past. My tale serves as a warning for those who would seek to wield power without regard for the consequences. I hope that my story would resonate through the ages, a reminder that the pursuit of ambition can lead to devastation. The burden of my legacy weighed heavily on my soul, yet as I slipped into the darkness, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps in the end, my mistakes would serve as a guiding light for future generations. If this story haunts you as much as it haunts me, if you feel the weight of my choices pressing upon your heart, remember that history is shaped by more than just the power of the crown. It is molded by the human experience, a tapestry woven from triumph and tragedy. Subscribe to uncover the deeper stories behind the figures who shaped our world. For history's shadows hold countless tales waiting to be told. And in the echoes of the past, we may yet find the wisdom to guide us toward a brighter future. The lessons of ambition, love, and loss are as relevant today as they were in my time. And perhaps by understanding our past, we can navigate the complexities of our present.